This week on Cosmic Sponge, killer paranormal raccoons strike close to home. Canada releases 20 years of UFO reports. A woman claims she has daily encounters with alien spacecraft and has the pictures to prove it. For our main topic, we explore the case of Armando Valdes, a Chilean army corporal that disappeared right before his men, only to return 15 minutes later, comatose and with unexplained physical changes. Also in this episode, we work on our Spanish. Let's explore this strange encounter I like to call Ese extranjero me acaricia, or that alien that fondled me. It started...
Did you use Google Translator for that?
Yeah.
Welcome to Cosmic Sponge, the podcast where we talk... Now, let's see. How about I change it up to we discuss UFOs and other weird wonders in the world. I'm Stephen Hawk.
And I'm Jimmy Coe.
Tonight we are going to be looking at specifically the case of Armando Valdes.
Well done.
Who is an individual back in the 1970s that had a very strange time travel experience. But before we get into that, Jimmy, what you been up to this week?
Well, my chickens died. All of them dead. Dead by the raccoons.
Yeah, death by raccoon.
Yep. Well, I think it was more than one. I think they got together. Little clan of them came up and...
They decided to team up.
Yeah, what do you call a group of raccoons? What's that called? A herd?
Brood.
A brood? A brood of raccoons.
I don't know. Let me see here. That's a good question.
A brood of raccoons. Raccoons.
You made me lose one of my stories.
Sorry.
A group of raccoons is called a nursery.
Man, that's a brutal, bloody nursery, let me tell you, because it was carnage inside of that chicken coop.
It says raccoons only live 2 to 3 years in the wild, but a raccoon can live up to 20 years in captivity. So it's not unlike human beings, I guess.
I tell you what, the reason why they only live 2 or 3 years is because they kill people's chickens and the people get mad and pull out their guns and start blowing their brains out.
Yeah.
Not that I do that.
Now, hold on a second. I found another thing that says a group of raccoons is called a gaze. So what's the right answer?
I don't know. Gaze sounds a little bit more mysterious and evil, like some kind of hypnotist that's going to look into my eyes, chicken. Look into my eyes.
A group of raccoons. Raccoons are social animals within a family group. Here's an article about pest control of raccoons. You want me to forward it to you?
It's okay. I got a sidearm.
Seen anything good in the news?
I did. I saw a article about the Canadian government specifically releasing UFO reports from the past 20 years.
I saw that.
500 plus reports spanning nearly 300 pages, containing dozens of strange sightings from everything from commercial pilots to police officers. The article I found that really breaks this down is from Vice. The Canadian Freedom of Information laws that Vice utilized to get this information produced this large report of 300 plus pages. There are a lot of interesting stories that came out of it. Other unusual observations that are found within the pages include Newfoundland police, Newfoundland. People from Newfoundland, let us know what that is.
Newfoundland, man.
Newfoundland?
Newfoundland.
What?
Newfoundland. That's how it's said.
Newfoundland? It's not said Newfoundland. I do not call my dog a Newfoundland.
What do you call it? A Newfoundland?
No, I call it a Newfie.
Oh, well.
We shorten it. Anyway, from this place that starts with an N, tracking 2 brightly colored flying objects in August of 2001 and December 2018, a passenger flight from Alaska to Seattle reported pulsating lights descending from 60,000 feet. So you said you saw this report. Did you see any in there that looked really interesting to you?
Well, I haven't had a chance to look through all of them. As you pointed out, it's 300 pages, but I did put this article from Vice. I'm looking at the same one Jimmy mentioned. It is on our Facebook page. So listeners, if you're interested in looking at this, take a look at it. I mean, this is their official just UFO reports. Now, it's very dry. Okay, like I'm just going to pull one up at random here. It has classification, unclassified, subject, Cirrus report, which I'm not sure what that reference is. This is January 6th, I guess, of 2019. Whoever filled out this report, I can't read their writing very well.
Yeah, that's one thing I noticed, that Canadian penmanship, if this is any indication.
Well, maybe it's the same person. It's like the Nick Pope of Canada or something doing these.
And he just failed penmanship classes.
Oh, it's a service report identification.
Yeah.
Service, what is that? Like their FAA or something? Or CIRVIS? It's an acronym, I can tell.
Well, while you're looking that up, I'm going to throw out one that I thought was really cool. One uncommonly long report even details a sighting that was confirmed by military radar. On the night of December 23, 2018, a fisherman in the Bay of Fundy and a woman at home in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia, both contacted a search and rescue center to report a light that was yellow, steady, and hovering high above the Atlantic Ocean. When Royal Canadian Air Force personnel reviewed radar data from NORAD, the Joint Canadian-U.S. Air Defense Alliance, they observed 3 primary radar hits that correlated almost exactly to the time and location of the sighting. This is an area that has good low-level radar coverage, so there is no explanation of why there were only 3 points of lights, all at exactly 12,800 feet, with no points leading up to or continuing on at any other altitudes. A Canadian Air Defense Sector report states.
Nice. That's a good one. Yeah, so service, CIRVIS, is an acronym for Communications Instructions for Reporting Vital Intelligence Sightings. And actually, in parentheses, according to this, it says U.S. DOD.
Well, and they're also infrequently reported to Transport Canada. The reports received are a result of natural phenomena such as fireballs, weather balloons, and meteors. Wait a minute, weather balloons aren't natural, a spokesperson said.
Yeah, here's one. UFO sighting, September 23rd, 2019, large bright orb size of a football field. Hovered for a short time, then moved east very fast. Reported to, and then they've got a bunch of stuff redacted, phone number. This is all information received by CADS from redacted. It has been assessed as not a threat, so this is for your records. From the Canadian Air Defense Sector, Jean E. McLean. McLean!
That's stupid.
Yeah, this is great. I mean, you could sit here and read tons of these. I mean, 300, 500 reports, 300 pages. Yeah, we may want to move on.
Yeah.
I know you and I both are sitting there just like scrolling through these, reading them.
I'm not going to read anymore. I can't read the penmanship on half of these.
They usually have a little typed report at the end of it.
Half the kids in my high school class wrote like that. I was one of them.
Here's one. Redacted, reported seeing thousands of objects passing overhead, moving at a very high rate of speed in a west-east direction on the 19th of October at 0600 for 15 minutes in St. Walburg, Saskatchewan. The objects were described to be diamond in shape with bright lights at a high altitude, producing no sound, with smaller objects trailing. Redacted said that there were thousands of objects moving across the sky, and then there's a big redacted section that says claimed to have cell phone pictures of the event. Also stated that a similar event was witnessed in Loon Lake, 45 kilometers to the north on October 16th.
Well, needless to say, folks, you have 300 pages worth of UFO reports just released by the Canadian government that are joy to read through if you can read bad penmanship. So get on that.
It's going to be kind of neat to see what else comes of this. I'm hoping some on-the-ground UFO researchers look up some of these people.
Oh, I'm sure they will.
You never know. We'll be able to get a little more details about some of these things.
Yeah, a lot of people in the UFO community are probably very familiar with Chris Rutkowski, who collected a ton of this UFO information, and some of it directly from this agency. These reports have been released in various books he's written and communications and presentations he's given throughout the years. Some of it's going to be old hat, and some of it, for many of us, is going to be new. as we just get into the UFO phenomena and really researching it. Good stuff, nonetheless. 300 pages worth.
An individual in Burnby who reported observing 15 UFOs. Report indicated the UFOs were approximately the size of a football field, and they were shooting green laser beams and dropping green balls of light. Objects were reported as being 20 feet above their high-rise. A second call from the same person was received. He now indicated there were about 50 UFOs, some landing at Burnby Mountain and some at Metrotown. They were reported as zooming around quickly but not shooting anymore, and that they appeared to be getting really aggressive.
Well, that sounds promising.
Anyway, yeah, fascinating. That's some good reading material. So, folks, again, I posted this on Facebook, so jump in there and see what you find. Another story I posted on Facebook, speaking of UFOs, there's a woman from St. Louis, Lily Nova, 29, says that she had her first encounter with aliens November of 2020 after taking up astrophotography to cure her lockdown boredom, and has been visited by aliens ever since. So I guess going on 2 years now? Something like that.
Nice.
Year and a half.
And what has she learned from these alien visitations? Has she gotten an alien ashtray or something like that we can examine, or has she just seen things?
This is what she says. They've approached her in all manner of spacecraft, including metallic ships, black triangles, and orbs that move in an unearthly, quote, way. She also says that she knows what some of the beings look like.
Ooh.
She first started getting into astrophotography in the summer of 2020 during lockdown, which eventually led to her first encounter with aliens just a few months later in November. My first encounter with aliens and UFOs was very intense. I went outside for some fresh air one night, and I immediately locked eyes with a bright light hovering above the neighborhood. I started investigating and realized it was a UFO. Seconds later, I looked away briefly, and when I looked back, there was a second craft that was much closer. I could actually see the triangle shape of the craft. The UFOs did impressive maneuvers to show me that wasn't regular aircraft before they disappeared above me. It really spooked me because aliens and UFOs aren't something I have thought much about before. It was a total reality-shifting experience. A couple of months later, I had my second encounter. After that, it kept happening more frequently, and now I am having experiences daily. During my encounters, I have also been able to see what the beings look like. One of the first beings I saw was a girl with light blue skin. She had no hair, but she was very beautiful. She was wearing a skin-tight gray suit, and I saw her shipmates standing behind her in the same uniform. Now, were they all in the same uniform? Seems like it'd be a little crowded.
I don't know. I'm riveted and jealous because I want to see a bunch of alien things, unless it's caused by some kind of psychosis.
I believe they send images of themselves to me through telepathy.
Ooh.
I'm just hoping she got the window rolled down in time.
I'm saying if she's getting those images, she must leave her windows open at night.
Well, she goes outside to do her astrophotography, so I guess the glass barrier wouldn't be a problem there.
Right, yeah.
I think they are easing me into an introduction, as it would be such a shocking experience for any human to have an alien walk up to you. Lily believes that the aliens were testing the waters with her after her first shocking encounter, as she says they were motioning towards her and knew she was recording. She thinks they then gave her some space to process the experience before appearing to her again. I could not believe what I was seeing. It was groundbreaking, and it piqued my interest in astrophotography even more. I needed to find out as much as possible. I abandoned my career as a nutritionist because I was overtaken by my passion for finding out more about UFOs and aliens. It's not something I ever expected to happen. The shock of my encounters with UFOs eventually turned to comfort as I had more and more experiences. It felt like I was developing a relationship with them. These experiences have changed everything for me. It has totally changed my view of the world, and I have learned so much about the cosmos and other beings. I have been focusing on spreading awareness of what I have found. She now believes that she can invite these experiences with the aliens and UFOs when she is in a relaxed, open, and blissful state of mind. She says that she has even developed a sixth sense and intuitive gut feeling for when they are going to appear to her. Whenever I'm out doing my creative passion, astrophotography, this is when I believe I can make contact and invite these encounters. She said, since the shock wore off, I just feel love and joy and peace. They are such beautiful and positive experiences. Sometimes I even bawl my eyes out crying while it's happening.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, folks, I posted this story on our Facebook page as well.
Yeah, I got a question for you. So,
Okay. Now, real quick, she did take a few photographs, but they're real blurry. Can't really see much.
So you can look at this one of two ways. I mean, you can more than one of two ways, but I'm looking at it really quickly, just off the top of my head. One of two ways that either these experiences that she's having are just completely mental, in the sense of she's creating these inside her own mind, these experiences, these sightings and everything, and she's just seeing them herself, or they're really happening. And if they're really happening, why don't we get somebody from Project Galileo to follow her around for a couple of months with some really good equipment and just set it there? And then, bam, you'll be able to really quickly be able to determine whether or not she's able to call these space aliens in and get pictures of them and get photographs of them. And
well, remember, they've revealed themselves to her through telepathy. I'm not sure what that means, if they're sending her some type of psychic images or something.
But she's still able to capture blurry photos. So with better equipment, presumably, we'd be able to capture much better.
Right.
This reminds me of actually an interview I heard this past week with Christopher Mellon. And he was talking about some of the problems he has with the way the Air Force is collecting data, or rather not collecting data. He describes the capabilities without going into classified materials, but essentially, broadly speaking, talking about, I was amazed at how much he divulged. So he talked about this capability that they had to see from satellites going down to Earth, and that would allow them to see like a baseball at 60 miles or something.
I don't think that's a secret that we have this kind of technology. I mean, look at Google Earth. I mean, totally civilian. You can only imagine what the military has.
And they can view from the ground up, over the water, all over this part of the world. We see everything in very high resolution. The thought that they do not collect that data and do not have it, it has been proven false. They do have it. They just don't comply with congressional mandates for that data, at least recently, because they use semantics to not divulge that information. Instead of calling it UAPs internally, they call it something else. And that way, when they're abiding by the letter of the law, when they supply anything called UAP, but internally they label it as something else.
Which is probably why they labeled it UAPs 10 years ago when they started ATIP. Well, there's also the stigma of UFOs.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that argument before. He's always talked about that. I know we have a lot of that capability. A lot of it's also disseminating the data. I mean, you're absolutely right. They've passed some new laws that they are supposed to divulge this information to Congress. And in a sense, I assume they would pass it on to the American people and on to the world, but we're not seeing anything yet. I'm not a big conspiracy theorist, but I know if we have some of these capabilities, if they ever found anything extraordinarily strange, I don't think they would pass it on to the American people. If they really did find some triangular-shaped UFO hovering over a lake somewhere, I mean, how do you roll that out? How do you roll that kind of stuff out to the public, right? How do you roll out Pascagoula and people being abducted? I don't know.
I think you roll it out the way you roll out everything. Breaking news. Today, we learned that...
Flash!
Cheetos takes a nosedive in snack foods. And also, a large UFO was seen over a lake.
Going to move on to tonight's subject, but before we do, I'd like to remind everyone to please rate and review the podcast. It helps other people find the show. Now, hold on before you fast forward through this section. Jimmy has something real important to tell you about.
So we have a Patreon site. You can go to patreon.com/CosmicSponge. And there we have 3 levels of support, one at $3, one at $5, and one at $10. Each level gives you an increasing amount of additional materials dealing with UFO and other strange phenomena from around the world. We have coming out at least twice a month right now, and more as we get the capability to do more. But right now, twice a month, we have a comic strip that comes out that I myself draw. So I'm just this is like a guilty pleasure where I get to draw little comic strips and share it with you guys.
And they're pretty funny.
And, well, thank you, Stephen. Also, we have a Discord server set up with 3 different tiers, and this allows us to communicate directly with our Patreons and get feedback from you guys, as well as at the higher levels, allowing you guys to decide what kind of shows you're going to see in the near future. We're also looking at producing additional BTS goodies. That's behind the scenes of how we put the show together, the kind of equipment we used, a lot of our pre-production and some of our post-production, and we'll share some tidbits and information for you guys out there who may want to get into podcasting yourself. And also, I think you're
leaving out the best part.
The GOAT.
The Weird Wonder Show.
We do have an additional show. Steve, you want to tell us about it?
So we are now producing, just for our Patreon subscribers and supporters of the show, we have a new show called Weird Wonders, where we either pick a topic, such as this week, we are looking at resurrecting the thylacine. So we did an episode, back in episode 18, we talked about the Tasmanian tiger. That animal has moved into the world of cryptids because a lot of people still see them. They claim to see them in Australia and Tasmania, New Zealand, and other places down under. But recently, a lab announced in Melbourne that they are planning to resurrect the Tasmanian tiger using technology like cloning and things like that. So we cover that story on our Weird Wonders, but we also go into other creatures that have been talked about, resurrecting. And last week, what did we do last week on the Weird Wonders show?
That was last week. I don't remember.
Well, we did some other news stories on the Weird Wonder. So the Weird Wonder show, it's going to last anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes, and it's going to be typically us looking at more news shows. So on the main show now, we're planning on only doing 2 news stories, 1 each, and then covering the rest of them on the Weird Wonder show. The main thing is, if you want to support us, and Jimmy and I love doing this show every week, but it's not free to produce it, and we have costs associated with doing this every week. We're just asking for a little bit of help to keep this thing going, and you get some neat stuff in return if you do help us out. Now, if you want to do just a one-time gift, go to our webpage, look in the upper right-hand corner. There's a little coffee cup icon that's called Buy Me a Coffee, and you can do a one-time donation that way. So that's pretty much it. And like always, check us out on Facebook. Most of the news stories we cover on the show are there. Check us out on Instagram. Jimmy also has his twisted sense of humor there. We are also on YouTube. Our web page is cosmicsponge.com. Our contact information is firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. And now, on with tonight's show!
April 25th, 1977. Not far from the town of Putre, located in Chile's Tarapacá region, lies Pampa Uscama.
Wow.
Uscama.
That's a mouthful.
It is. A known zonas calientes, or hotspot for UFO activities. It was here in this desolate location that 1-2nd Corporal Armando Valdes Garrido would be transformed from a clean-cut, well-oiled fighting machine with a working wristwatch into a bearded, semi-conscious wreck with a broken wristwatch in a mere 15 minutes. Let's explore this strange encounter I like to call Ese Extranjero Me Acaricia, or That Alien That Fondled Me. It started...
Dude. Did you use Google Translator for that?
Yeah. Hey, my Spanish is imperfect. It started, as do many of these encounters, with lights in the sky. 23-year-old Corporal Valdes, a 5-year veteran in the Chilean army, was on patrol with 6 recruits. At 3:30 a.m., a guard on duty at a Chilean stable radioed Valdes and his men to notify them of unusual activity. Nearby, at about 500 meters away from them, a luminous UFO hovered just off the ground. At 4:15 a.m., Valdes decided to investigate, approached the orb, and disappeared into the surrounding landscape for 15 minutes. At 4:30, he reappears and mutters, "No sabrás quiénes somos, ni de dónde venimos, pero volveremos de nuevo," before collapsing into a semi-conscious state. Nearby, the UFO remained hovering. I'm sorry. Okay.
Was it shaped like a Mega Maid?
It was. Nearby, the UFO remained hovering until approximately 6:35 a.m. At 7 o'clock a.m., Valdes would recover enough to start the journey back to the town of Putre. This is just one version of the story, however, with others emerging in the following decades, layering distortions and mistellings, one upon another. The truth, however, can be found perhaps in the earliest versions compiled by Padre Araneda, a school teacher in the town of Putre, the same town the soldiers stumbled into after their terrifying ordeal. Yeah, so there are a lot of stories going on about this specific case. The one that comes closest to it, because I read probably 4 or 5 different renditions of the story, and there were a lot of discrepancies between them. So I went and tried to find the earliest possible telling of the story. And what I found, assuming that this is correct, was the original recording made by the school teacher located in that town that was taken like the day after this event took place, and he interviewed all of the soldiers that were there at the time. It starts out like most stories. They see some lights in the sky. They said that the light was pestering them all night. No one knew what it was all about, and this is an expressive remark that really kicks the recording off. Professor Araneda, he says, "Around what time did you see the light?" And the soldier replies, "At around 10 minutes to 4. And that would be on April the 25th, is when the soldier who was on guard duty noticed the lights at first. Now, Araneda then asked him, "You, Rosales, were pulling guard duty, and you were the first one to see it. What did you see?" Rosales says, "First I saw a light coming down, and then another, and then 2. One of them landed on that side of the mountain and another to the other side." So it's important to note that when he's doing this interview, they go back to that location to do the interview. They're at the site, and he's pointing to the location where the light came down. One of them was around where you can see that yellow spot, more or less where the trees are up there. In other words, Araneda says, it was over by the stone wall and the canyon. Then Corporal Valdes chimes in, "When we saw that, we grouped together and assumed a combat stance, shoulder to shoulder, and said, 'Don't anybody move. If something happens, it will happen to all of us.'" And then Araneda asked, "Then you saw the light vanish?" "I was on guard watching it, and it didn't go away. It only went away when the sun vanished from sight." "You calculated the light's magnitude?" "It was round as a ball, somewhat oval, increasing and decreasing. It seemed to approach us. It seemed to be messing with us." "How many men were in your squad?" Corporal Valdes responds, 7 men. "We all saw the same thing together. That's when I got lost, according to them. They called me, they looked for me, and then I vanished and fainted. They say I had spasms. I don't know. I don't recall a thing." Araneda asked, "Were the lights more or less parallel, one higher than the other?" Valdes responds, "No, the first light intensified when Rosales summoned me, and it later descended slowly over the hill. The other landed in front of us like this, as if calling to us, trying to intimidate us, like so," when he's making hand motions, I assume. "The perimeter lit up the cultivations, the grass and the mountains, is that correct?" Corporal Valdes, "The hill was lit up, and we could see its outlines in the cultivations. Despite the fact that the night was darker because there was no moonlight, it was even hard for us to walk in the dark. And when the light came down, the first one descended behind the mountain with a tremendous brightness, while the others were here before them. There was a flash, a very large glow, like a fire." The corporal's words were corroborated at every step by the remainder of the recruits that made up the patrol. Araneda, "I will now ask you to identify yourselves by rank and name." And then they go through each one of them. The recording ends here and then continues at the moment that the 8 protagonists of this phenomenon discuss the reappearance of Corporal Valdes under strange circumstances. Several voices come in to play. "Then the corporal reappeared. He was laughing and saying, 'You'll never know who we are or where we came from, and we're coming back again.'" And then Araneda asked, "And was the corporal speaking in his normal voice?" "Yes, of course. the voice he's always had, but a bit more hurried, altered, and when he passed out and came back again, he looked at us as if he didn't know us and rocked his head back and forth saying, "The light, the light." Another soldier chimes in. Later on, he fainted and woke up again and spoke. We tried to cover him, and he'd say, let go of me, and he'd struggle. Another soldier chimes in, and what he stared at the most was the light. He looked at it with his eyes wide open. How long was the corporal lost? The corporal was gone some 15 minutes. We approached the end of the rock wall and called his name. 4 of us went out to look for him, and then the other 3 went. We walked along somewhat, we shouted, called him by name, and the light was there. And we didn't hear his footsteps when he came. Like when a person approaches, you can hear them in the still of the night. We didn't hear that. And how long was he in the trance? He was like that for some 10 minutes, reacting. Sometimes he would recognize some of us and then faint, and then he would wake up and not know who we were, and then he'd quickly slip into a peaceful state. And you, Valdes, don't recall why you wanted to step away from your men a few meters to take a closer look? Valdes responds, all I can say is that something called my attention. Something was attracting me. It was like an internal communication with the light. I could even feel it when we all got together and assumed a defensive posture. I'm unsure whether it was a truly wonderful or awful sensation. It was extraordinary, and I'm telling you that we are 7 minds, 8 minds. It's one thing for a single person to suffer a hallucination, an apparition, but to have 7 people say the same thing? The problem is that I don't remember what happened. I only know what they've told me. What I do recall, when we saw the light at first, we wanted to move to find shelter, but something made us stay back, as if something was holding us back to see the light. I remember that I didn't separate more than 3 or 4 meters from the guys. From that moment on, I have no recollection. They say I vanished as if by magic. The most surprising thing is that I reappeared as if by magic. Do you recall what you did in that time period? No, the only thing I remember is what appears in my mind is like when I feel sleepy and I disappear down a deep well like that, something round like an abyss or so. From that point onward, my brain is empty. My mind can't fathom what happened. I can say it was something like a warning, as if saying that this isn't the first time we'll see each other, or that I shouldn't get involved in things that don't concern me. I don't know. I wasn't spoken to in words, if those beings truly exist. There were even sheep walking near us, and rather than running away, which is what they do when they feel something is strange, they remained still. They grouped in perfect silence. This disconcerted us even more. Our mascot dog, Huamachuco, as they call him, also remained quiet near the stone wall by the campfire.
What kind of guard dog? I thought dogs were supposed to go crazy when UFOs are around. I mean, they do it all the time, right? It's usually the first way you know. You go, well, and Huamachuco was barking like crazy, but now they're saying Huamachuco just stayed real still.
Maybe he's smoking the ganja.
Maybe.
There was also no sound to be heard. It was deafeningly quiet, and I invoked God and told the light to go away. I command you in God's name. We were ready for anything at that moment. We would die together, but no one was going to separate us. We even took an oath to remain together. Other voices chime in. Before the corporal got lost, he told us to snuff out the fire with a blanket. Valdes. Yes, it was as if the fire drew their attention, much like a child is drawn to a fire, as if they felt the fire drawing their attention. One of the soldiers says, next the corporal ordered us to remove the blankets, and I saw him go off to the end of the stone wall. I thought he was going to relieve himself, but 5 minutes went by, more or less, and he didn't return. We went looking for him, and he was gone. I remember that when he reappeared, he shouted, guys! It was like a cry for help. Valdes. Of course, you insisted that I was calling you from beyond the grave, as if trying to escape from something. Another recruit says, and when the corporal spoke to us upon returning, he said, guys, and his voice was odd. That's when he fainted, and I reached to pick him up. He regained consciousness and grabbed on us. It was as if that fake star wanted to take him away. He stared at the light. Another recruit. At that time, all we did was stare at the light. It was like a magnet. A magnetism that attracted our eyes. The light suddenly grew and forced us back off. Several recruits. And when he passed out, we settled him on the ground, and then the corporal would laugh loudly and then settle down. He also called out to his family, crying for help, saying they were taking him away. Araneda asked, "Do you remember returning to them?" Valdes, "No, I remember nothing more than waking up around 4:30, and then a recruit says, when he was in the trance, he would hold on and say, 'Leave me, let me go, don't hurt me.' Another conscript says, and when he asked us not to hurt him, he covered his ears as if not to hear anything at all." Valdes, "Now then, one thing I'm clear about. When the light appeared in front of us and we were shoulder to shoulder in battle stance, I was clear that we were us, but something happened. I had only just stepped away and it grabbed hold of me. Like they say, when our minds are all thinking about the same thing and united, nothing happened, as if the force couldn't affect me at all. Along with the void in your mind, was there a stretch during which the watch stopped? Isn't that so?" Araneda asked. Valdes, "It stopped at exactly 4:30 a.m. on the 25th of April, 1977. And then Araneda concludes with, "What I find odd is that the wristwatch shows a date of the 30th of April right now, and no one has tampered with it or changed the time."
That's the complete interview that was done the day after this encounter. And nowhere in that did I hear you mention about the 5-day growth beard. It was only a discrepancy with the watch.
That's all that's in that original presentation. Now, there is some follow-up that they have to this.
I mean, the story is that the men were around the campfire about 4:30 in the morning. They've been seeing the UFOs, but then Valdes goes into the bushes by himself and then disappears for just a few minutes. And then when he reappears, he claimed that 5 days had gone by and his watch said the 30th. And,
remarks and consideration.
Increased beard growth, accelerated clock time.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's what APRO had wrote in July of 1977. So where did that information come from? How did that become part of the story?
Looking here at some of the remarks and considerations following the recording, it should be mentioned that the transcription was made by journalists Luis Atura Carter and Luis Derroch, special correspondents of La Estrella de Arica. La Estrella de Arica, the Star of Arica. At the scene of the events, we can collect some details that are remarked by these experts, which drew their attention at that time. Among the redeemable facts of this document, the only one in existence when the events were still warm and with all of the recruits present, Pedro Araneda left his own impression on a highly peculiar event to which he was a witness. He saw that Corporal Valdes' beard was rather growing out, confirmed by Raul Salinas, one of the soldiers, and who provided all the elements needed for his superior to shave on the night of the events. One of the things they followed up on was his beard. It was common, in matter of fact, regulation, and it was really enforced in the area in which Valdes operated, that the men had to shave daily and have a clean-cut look.
Right.
So Araneda said the following on the recording: "There's something very strange here. The corporal has a dense growth of beard, and naturally, he was clean-shaven. It's very strange to have a dense growth of beard in such a short period of time." It's a little odd way
that was in your original. That was in the original recording from the day after.
Yes, and those are notes, I guess, that Araneda posted on the recording when he wasn't directly interviewing the soldiers.
Yeah, it's a very strange event. So this man disappears after all of them witnessed some UFOs, reappears shortly afterwards, has this 5 days growth of beard. His watch shows that 5 days have passed. And he blurts out this message when he returns and says, "You will never know who we are, nor where we come from, but we will return again." And then he fell asleep and finally come around afterwards. Now, this became a very famous UFO story. At first, the Chilean government and military tried to downplay it. They were concerned about this getting out. I mean, rightly so. But it did get out. And but I found an interesting interview, and I think you've read this one too, from there's a pretty serious UFO researcher that looked into this story and was looking for ways to debunk it, as every good investigator should, but just looking for the facts. And this interview was conducted in 2003. Now, this would have been 25 years after the events of that night. It was an exclusive interview with Tara Ciel, and he starts off by saying he knew that he was not abducted. He said that his story had been misinterpreted, although the matter of the beard and the wristwatch are true. He also spoke about a current project, a book that should appear by the end of the year, in which he retells his version of events which transpired on April 25th, 1977. Now, this is in 2003. He says he's working on a book. So the interview says, recently you've been engaged in a discrete research into your experience. Is that true? He said, yes, I've been fully involved in developing my book, and furthermore, looking into my experience since I wish to be as factual as possible in my story. As a result of this research, have you returned to the scene of the events? Yes, I went back in November 2002, 25 years later. Pampa Luscuma and the remains of the horse stables where the events occurred. How did you feel about going back? As you can imagine, it was shocking. It was the first time I went back after 2 decades. It was a motivating experience which allowed me first and foremost to confirm or recall certain details which were lost with the passing of time. Tara asks, while much was said about the abduction of Corporal Valdes, there was none. What's your version? Truly, I wasn't abducted. This is the reason for the sensitive nature of what I'm putting forth in the book. Some important background details are to be released. Did you think at any time that you had been abducted, or did you always know this wasn't the case? Look, it's really complicated to explain all of a sudden. That's the reason behind my trip to Putre, my scientific studies, and the book I'm writing, because it's all very complicated. But did you think at first that you'd been abducted? I would say I knew immediately how things had happened. What I'm explaining in my book is making known the reasons for which certain items went off on the other track. In other words, your initial story was misconstrued. Indeed, I didn't think at first that I'd been abducted, although the matter of the growth of the beard is true, as well as the subject of my wristwatch. But for this reason, I have taken to writing the book to explain the reasons behind all these things. I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but anyway, he continues just saying he's working on the book, went back, has been doing some research on it, and that he actually remembered everything, but some things are not he wants to get the story straight. So she says, any options to publish the book abroad? And he said, yes, there have been offers from abroad, but I don't want to entertain them until the book is finished. My greatest desire is for everyone to read it, since I have a message for all humankind in it. Therefore, its publication in Chile or elsewhere is unimportant. We will decide where to publish it at some point. He has an important message for mankind that I assume came from the aliens, or he's also a born-again Christian, so who knows?
Drink more Ovaltine.
That's the important message for mankind.
Yes.
Well, it seems that every time we have a contactee or abductee or whatever you want to call them, experiencer, that has a message for mankind, the message is always like, be nice to each other. You're polluting the world. Stop polluting the world. Stop with the global warming. It's like, man, if they're an advanced alien species, why don't they really give us something like a problem of the unified field theory? Now, that would be a message from an alien civilization I would believe in. But when these people claim to always have a message for humankind, it's always the same thing.
Lame.
Stop playing with nuclear weapons. You're going to blow the planet up.
Duh.
Not like, hey, here's a way to solve your energy problem so you don't have to burn fossil fuels anymore. Here's endless energy. Here's perpetual motion machine. I mean, give us some technology. That's the message humankind needs, right?
Here's the missing Doctor Who episodes. So,
hey, there's a missing Dark Shadows episode too.
So here's later developments that I found. Here's some later developments I found that were discovered while a couple of researchers, Patricio Abaslium and skeptic Diego Zuniga, were researching this case for a book they were writing. And it was in the course of the investigation that Valdes, now retired, having retired in 1999 as a sergeant in the Chilean army, dropped a bombshell in a recorded interview recanting a crucial part of the story. He continued to stick to the story that the ball of light hovering near the soldiers, but he informed them that he never disappeared inside of a UFO. Rather, he claimed that he left the soldiers to urinate and then stayed behind a wall throughout the key 15 to 20 minutes of his alleged disappearance. He now said that he decided then to play a prank on the soldiers by pretending he had vanished. He explained the growth of the beard, saying he hadn't shaved for several days. He also said his wristwatch wasn't working and the date change was just a coincidence.
Really?
Yeah.
What year was that?
This is in 2002. However, Valdes' confession is not as simple as it seems. For one, the other soldiers still support the original version. Then there is the additional important factor that Valdes became a devout evangelical Christian many years ago, a member of the Unión de Centros Bíblicos of Tampico, of which he is now a bishop.
Man, these Spanish words are killing us.
Man, English kills me, so what are you going to do? One can argue that the denial on part of Valdes is based on his religious faith, a position which Abolsemi considers plausible.
Well, that's strange considering you have an interview from 2002 and he says it was a prank and it never happened. Then I have an interview from September 26, 2003, in which he said it did happen and he's preparing to publish a book, which incidentally I looked for and I don't think exists.
The investigation was launched in 2002. They don't state what date or time that Valdes dropped this bombshell in this article I'm reading.
Okay. Well, what do you think?
Well, I think if he said that he was playing a prank and it just got out of hand, more than likely that's what happened. Let's think that what we have is we have soldiers in the Chilean army where their leader is a 23-year-old kid, all right? And they're more than likely 18 years old, 19 years old, the other soldiers in the group, the recruits, and maybe their first time out on a patrol, second time out on a patrol, who knows? And he's playing a prank on them. And it just gets a little out of hand, and then when it goes up the rank of command, then it's like, uh-oh, what the hell did I just do?
And he has to stick with the story.
He's got to stick with the story until he retires, and then he retires, and he's like, I'm done.
Yeah, he waits till he retires, right? But, and two, some guys really grow a thick beard overnight. I'm not one of them, but I've known some men, they'll get the 5 o'clock shadow at 10 a.m., right? Yeah. I mean, some guys just really have thick, quick beard growth, and it sounded like they were out on patrol or some kind of camp out or whatever they were doing. Some kind of guard post, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they'd been out there for a few days, and that's why he had the beard's growth.
Oh, yeah.
He said he hadn't shaved for a few days.
I grew up with kids that came to school looking like Christian Bale from American Psycho, and by like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they look like Grizzly Adams.
Yeah. Well, you know what? That's a bummer, man. You just dropped a big bombshell on me, man.
I was saving that. I was building it up for you, and then
Well, I was all excited about the interview I found in 2003, which I know you read as well, because both of us had talked about the lack of being able to find this book. I never found it, so I guess he never published it. Maybe right after this interview, he decided to come clean. Wonder what the rest of like MUFON and the other UFO community people that still want to believe that it's true, wonder how they react to it.
Well, they seem to think he's lying about this new version, given that all of the other soldiers supported a series of events that happened right after the account where Valdes was acting bizarrely.
Well, what did they see?
Exactly what was said earlier, that he had fainted and they saw some lights. He came wandering out of the darkness. He collapsed in their hands. He was acting bizarre and claiming that there was the light, and you don't know who we are, where we come from, we're coming back, drink more Ovaltine. All that stuff's going on all at the same time. And these guys are like, yeah, that's what he said. He said, drink more Ovaltine. And they're sticking to their story.
Maybe he just played it up and made a prank out of it. I don't know.
That seems more likely.
What would his motivation be for?
You know those guys. You've been to school with those guys. Those guys are dicks. Who will?
No, not that. What would be his motivation for, if it did happen, as I'm sure some true believers will believe and think he's been pressured by MJ-12 or the Men in Black or something to recant his story, but what would be his motivation for, if it really happened, he really did disappear for 5 days, but now to say, hey, that never really happened.
So the end of the article, they say, on the other hand, he could be looking for an easy solution to end decades of being besieged by journalists. So that would be it. He's tired of people hitting him up about the story, and he just wants to let it all go.
He could just not take interviews.
Yeah.
After all this time, I imagine he would still be contacted by people that didn't believe that he finally came clean.
I think this article sums it up really well. In the end, the conflicting versions of the Valdes case show how difficult it is to prove conclusively that any UFO case is either unknown or prosaic. But regardless of what the final verdict may turn out to be in the Valdes case, it is, if one is ever reached, there's no doubt that this close encounter is at least of great sociological importance in the history of the Chilean ufology and, to a lesser extent, that of ufology in general. Ufology in general, yeah.
So chalk that one up for probably not.
Yeah.
Once again, too good to be true.
There's too many of them. Too many of them.
Yeah. Well, I think that is all I've got on this story, especially after that bombshell on my head. I guess I didn't research very well. I mean, I kept finding all these stories about it, trying to find different versions and put it all together. And then, of course, the interviews. I missed the skeptical one. I guess I should have looked at that one.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bummer. You always want to find a really good one that's true.
I always want it. I mean, we want it to be real, right?
Yeah,
you know, I mean, we want the ashtray, the proof.
I want the hard proof.
Well, all right. I think that is all we have on that after that revelation that Jimmy had.
You sound so disappointed. I feel bad.
Yeah, man.
We're doing it because one day we're going to find that story.
One day we will find the truth. The truth is out there. Wait a minute. We should use that as our tagline. Nah.
That's really catchy. It never worked. Nobody would ever use that.
Right. All right. Well, we're getting ready to head on out. But before we do, I'd like to remind everyone to please rate and review the podcast. It helps other people find the show. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Our webpage is cosmicsponge.com, and our contact information is firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. And don't forget to look for us on Patreon. Jimmy.
Yeah.
Real quick, the Patreon.
Oh, yeah, real quick, the Patreon. Go over to patreon.com/cosmicsponge. You can sign up for one of 3 levels, and each level gives you some extra goodies if you're into the UFO stuff and the other weird wonders news and weird world cartoon. Man, that's a lot of was in there. So, and every dollar you give us goes right back into the show to help us grow it and build it out and add some new flair and fun things to it, and as well toward the purchase of our new resurrected goat species. Which
the Ibex.
Yeah, the
Ibex.
Yes,
Ibex.
We're going to get a Spanish goat.
And Jimmy some more box wine.
And we're going to call him Lou.
All right. Well, with all that out of the way, this is Stephen Hawk signing out, and I'll see you next week.
And Jimmy Coe, ese extranjero me acaricia.
You planned that one, didn't you?
I did.
What did it say?
That alien fondled me.
That's terrible.
It is if you're on the receiving end of it.
Man, you really bummed me out with that story.
I'm sorry, man. I didn't mean to.
The guy comes clean, dude. We should have just started out. The whole episode could have been 10 minutes.
It could have been.
Well, this guy said he had this big time travel experience. Turned out he was telling a big deal.
I think it's important to let the people know that the things that look really promising, probably not. You got to be skeptical. You got to be skeptical, but not debunking.
Okay, class. Yeah, okay.
I hate that guy. I don't hate him. I'm sure he was a wonderful man who just was really bad at...
Just a dick.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's get out of here.
Later, Gator. That's all for this week's episode of Cosmic Sponge. Please don't forget to rate and review us wherever you listen. It helps others find the show. If you have any questions or have a story you'd like to share, you can contact us using our email account, firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.